wondering if you guys actually enjoy treating your customers like a piece of shit, because that's how I felt when I went to the Alamo Draft House. Okay? You know what? I didn't know that I wasn't supposed to text in your little crappy-ass theater. It was too f***ing dark in that place for me to find my seat, alright? I was using my phone as a flashlight to get to my f***ing seat. So excuse me for using my phone in USA, United States of America, where you are free to text in a theater. I was not aware that I couldn't text in your theater, all right? I've texted in all the other theaters in Austin, and no one ever gave a fuck about what I was doing on my fucking phone, all right? And it was on silent. It wasn't on loud. It wasn't bothering anybody. You guys obviously were being assholes to me, and I'm sure that's what you do, you know, to rip people off. You take my money, and then you throw me out. You know, I will never be coming back to your Alamo Draft House or whatever. I'd rather go to a regular theater where people are actually polite. And, you know, I'm going to tell everyone about how you are. And I'm pretty sure you guys are being on purpose. So thanks for making me feel like a customer. Thanks for taking my money.
All right. Is everyone here? Ants.
Yes, sir.
Roaches.
Yeah, what of it?
Rodents.
Let's get this cheese.
All right, come on, everyone. Settle down, please. Look, we all know why we're here. We'll be eating like queens when we're through with this. That pantry's finally ours. Nobody can stop us now. Charge! No, there's no way. It can't be. It's Old Colony! Old Colony Pest Control. Veteran-owned Massachusetts, Rhode Island-based operation with everything you could dream of for your pest needs. Equipped with top-of-the-line gear to guarantee your home is protected and staying healthy. Phone number is 774-400-5993. Give them a call for the backup you need. Tell them that General Red Revere sent you. They handle anything from ants, roaches, ticks, mosquitoes, rats, and more.
No wildlife or termites at this time.
Hey, watch it, buddy. We're marching.
Phenom Radio is the home of the hottest indie music. Tune into the Phenom Radio Top 20 Countdown, Monday through Friday, 10 p.m. Eastern Time, 7 p.m. Pacific.
A razor sharp pencil, rate your paws pencil, when the sun...
Reunion about to crack. We got the whole crew back.
Really, bitch? A cabin in the woods.
Now let's get it all in perspective for all y'all enjoyment.
You still a slave to the white man?
Y'all gonna start calling my wife the white man, all right?
Newness, here's the anthem. Put your hands up that you shoot with. Count your
What
loot
we
with.
do on Juneteenth.
Oh, hell no.
Where are you going?
Look for the fuse box. What kind of house is this? No, thank you.
The blackening?
Whoa! Jim Crow Monopoly.
Shit probably runs on racism.
Pick a card and save Morgan.
What do you mean, save Morgan?
Refuse to play, and she dies.
I think we have to play the game.
In your predicament, the black character is always the first to die. I will spare your lives if you sacrifice the person you deem the blackest.
The blackest?
Nobody should judge anybody in here, bro.
You have 2 minutes to decide.
Shanika, she say nigga the most.
Nigga.
See?
Wait.
Y'all can't pick me. I'm gay.
Oh,
Clifton.
yeah.
That can prove I'm not the blackest.
Prove it.
I've never seen Friday. I voted for Trump.
What?
What?
Twice.
Big money, playboy, your time's up.
We need a plan.
Don't say it. Don't you dare.
Don't say this dumb shit.
We have to split up.
Your time has run out. It's time to die.
There's a crazy person out here hunting us. You got Rosa Parks on your shirt, right? Would she be sitting down right now?
I mean, that's exactly what she did.
Made you look. Made you look.
Why black women gotta save everyone all the damn time?
Made you look.
Yo, stop playing.
I got a gun.
That's too DMX. What are you doing?
A better job, a better home, a better life. Who hasn't wished for these things, worked for them, and sought a place where they had a better chance of becoming real? For generations, Brockton has welcomed those seeking something better. From those who came in search of opportunity to today's multicultural population that makes us the most diverse community in all of New England. Brockton is a place where homes are more affordable, communities closer, where a strong and talented workforce fuels the success of businesses big and small, and the vision of a more diverse and equitable America is being realized every day. It's where ideas take root, businesses grow, communities thrive, new beginnings unfold, and the promise of a better life is kept. Brockton, Massachusetts, where better begins.
Time to grow up. You got a problem with your self-esteem and ego. Oh, here we go again. It's time to grow up now. It's time to grow up. You got a problem with your self-esteem and ego. Oh, here we go again. It's time to grow up now.
This is Viana Marie, and you're watching The Booth, a Sinister One production on Hoobazoo.com. This is Viana Marie, and you're watching
All right, your boy Sinister One broadcasting live from the City of Champions. You are watching The Booth, and I am here with my guests already. I got to give a big thanks to last week, Lovern Gordon Crystal Tyson, but this week it's First Tuesdays with my guys, as you know, Ken Diesel, Robert Resnick, and we've also got a special guest tonight, Jamal Brathwaite, candidate for Brockton City Council at large. He's joining us tonight, but I'm going to get into my sponsors, MDB Electronics. If you need your controller fixed, get it on out there. He'll have it back to you in 48 hours. Also, Vianna Marie, check out her library of music. She's at 494,000 streams. Let's go. Let's push it to 500,000. Her latest album, Vianna Marie, It's Personal, is available now. Also, Tactical Target Systems. If you see my targets out there at the range, Tactical Target Systems is where I get them. I love Boston sports. For a t-shirt, chance to win. Also, Vianna Marie, Kimberly Ian, Empowerment Photography for Women. And if you saw me, I was in Maggie Valley last week. That's why there was no booth. I was there for the Slingshots and the Smokies. I had to get a rear tire, so I got to give a big shout out to Momentum Tire Car Care for hooking me up with a tire. And before we get into the news booth, I'm going to let my guys say hello, and then I'm going to introduce my first guest here. I'm going to start with our R Squared to say hello today.
Good evening, everybody. Always love the first Tuesday of the month.
And I got Ken over here.
Great to be back. Happy early summer. Looking forward to a great show.
It didn't feel like summer when I got back to Boston from Maggie Valley.
That was kind of my sarcastic comment.
I guess so. Yeah, I was pissed. I was so mad. We hit Jersey. It was like 40-something degrees. But I'm actually going to be doing a whole separate booth because I have so much footage and stuff from Maggie Valley and the Slingshot Convention. So I'm actually going to be putting on a special show in regards to that. So I'm not going to talk too much about it if you tuned in tonight, but I do have a guest, and I'm going to let my guest introduce himself and what he's on here for, because this is election season starting early. Jamal?
Hi, everybody. Welcome. My name is Jamal Brathwaite, and I'm running for Brockton City Council at large, just trying to improve our city one day at a time.
And you're on here. Let them know why you're on here, because there's a very important budget meeting that's coming up that's every year.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, so today is June 6, 2023, and the Brockton City budget book is available, and there's a proposal of over half a billion dollars that's being proposed. June 15th is a public hearing where anyone from the public can provide input. If there's something you want to see achieved in Brockton, please reach out to your elected officials and come speak up on Thursday, June 15th at 6 p.m. at the Brockton City Council, at Brockton City Hall during the City Council meeting. I'll be there, and I hope to see you then.
And I got to let these guys talk, because these guys are involved in politics in the areas. While R Square was involved down there in Florida, he was involved with Delray politics down there. Ken Diesel's been involved with a lot. And these budget meetings, this budget meeting that happens in June here is where the budget for the year is kind of broken down. And I want these guys to kind of just chime in on the importance of why people should show up to these meetings. And I've been telling this on people on Facebook too. Why people should be filling out the census every 10 years. Why people should be filling out that voter registration form that you put everybody who lives in your house. Because this budget that's about to be announced breaks down from the monies that come from what's based on the census and things of that sort. And you have a say at these meetings as to where this money should go and where it should be allocated to. Ken, you were involved, and I know, Rob, you're involved with that stuff. So I want you guys to just kind of let people kind of know how important it is to show up, because what happens is things happen with the budgets, and the first thing people do is complain, but they never show up for the budget meetings. And I know you're down there when you were in Delray, Rob, you were very involved with your community, but it's the same thing everywhere, right? Where people don't show up to these, the city hall will send out a flyer and let you know that, hey, this could be coming in our town. Show up at this meeting in yay or nay. And people don't show up. And then when it gets built, everybody's complaining. I'm going to let you talk about it, because you were down there in the Delray community, very involved.
Well, it's simple. It's like you said, right? I mean, it's government by the people for the people. But if the people don't give a crap and don't show up and don't cast a vote and don't pay attention, then it becomes government by the special interests or by the very small percentage of people. Our voter turnout in the United States is abysmal compared to other democracies and even in our own right. And, that's the problem. So, in presidential elections in 2024, we're going to have a slightly higher turnout, but it's still not going to be impressive compared to what it should be. and in non-presidential years. And so people who are elected, Jamal's running for office, seems like a really smart guy, wants to make a difference in Brockton. He's probably going to face maybe 20% of the citizens who are going to vote in that election. And so whoever wins, and I don't just mean Brockton, obviously across the country and state and local elections, it's a tiny percentage of the population that's making decisions for everybody, and that affects the budget and policies and school boards. And so when we get all up in arms about what's happening or not happening, it's our own fault for not voting. And those of us that do vote are damn frustrated because, we see the consequences.
And Ken, I'm going to bring this to you because I'm going to say this. I didn't know much about the census and the voter registration and how it affects the budget. Ken Diesel and Bill Carpenter, rest their soul, when Ken and Bill were at WXBI WBT, Ken was involved with that last big census we had. I think it was like in 2020, Ken, or 2010. And I remember you and Bill Carpenter breaking it down to me saying, Keith, if people don't fill out the census, what happens is cities and towns don't have the proper number of people for the budget to be allocated. And then when you have people who don't register and then your school is got a abundance of 30 extra students because they didn't fill out the census. I'm going to let you, because you explained it well to me, Ken. I remember this whole discussion with you. You really broke it down.
I'll be very short because we have a limited amount of time.
Yep.
The aid to cities and towns, I'm going to talk about two things. First of all, the aids to cities and towns and the block grants to the federal government. So let's talk about the aids to cities and towns. That's the amount of money that the state legislature in Boston allots to various cities and towns. That number is based on the population, i.e. the more people you have, the bigger amount of the pie you're going to get. Now, there are other factors involved, that I won't get into that, but that's why it's very important, because a lot of aid is based on population. The towns with the bigger populations are going to get more money. Why? Because a lot of times aid is based on a per capita or per person basis. Let's take the schools, for example. Let's say the legislature decides they're going to give $5 for every student for the purposes of providing free lunches or discounted lunches. That's just one thing. And let's say that the population of Brockton, I don't know, I haven't looked at the numbers, is 10,000 students. Okay, that number, so they're going to base it on 10,000 students, it's $5 per person, that's $50,000. But let's say the actual number of students is 12,000. So instead of getting another $10,000, $60,000, we're only getting $50,000, which means we're going to come up short in feeding our students. Now, it's a very small example. Let's talk about the amount of money we give to the fire department or the road department or the police department. Again, you want to talk about public safety issues? You want to talk about having enough police on the street, firemen to respond, ambulance personnel? You want to talk about the roads? That's all based on the population of the city. Not only that, something more our guests will probably be very, very aware of, apportionment of representatives. That's based on population. The state constitution gives a certain amount of people that serve in the Mass House and the Mass Senate. Now, in the Mass House, it's based on the population, i.e. the more people in a given geographic area, the more representatives they're going to get. So if you don't return your census, you're cutting your own throat with regard to representation and apportionment. As a matter of fact, since one, you should know about that because you got a first-hand look about how congressional districts are drawn in Boston when you were doing the IT for that case in federal court.
Yes,
I mean, so you probably can talk about it more than anyone else. Every single piece of information, every budgetary item, every way we divide up the state and federal pie is based on population. The more people there are, the bigger the slice of the pie. That's how we determine, areas for things like block grants, for minimum wage allocations. I'll give you an example. If you're an employer and you want to hire someone who is not a U.S. citizen, you got to go into your geographic area and figure out what the average salary is for that geographic area. It depends on how many people are. So if you're an employer, the amount of money that you have to pay goes up or down based on accurate representation of the amount of people in your area. So that could affect your pocketbook. So yeah, every single thing you can think about with regards to your pocketbook is affected by the population.
And here's the funny thing, because here in Brockton, they just recently had to give pink slips to teachers, and everybody's up in arms, and they were complaining about the budget and complaining about this and that. And it was like, hold on, pay attention, people. It wasn't the budget, wasn't the reason why the teachers were laid off. The reason was because the census for this year says that we lost 1,300 students. Guess what? We lost 1,300 students. The budget says we don't need this many teachers, so the teachers were given pink slips. And I tell people one of the reasons why this happens is because people don't properly fill out these censuses or these things. And then what happens is in September and August, everybody's rushing down the school department to register their kids. And the budget is pretty much already has been set for what we're supposed to have this year. And now you've got classes that are overfilled. You're short teachers at the beginning of September because people haven't done what they did. And it was just driving me crazy that everybody was complaining and they weren't reading the whole story, that this was not a budget issue. This was a census issue of students. This happened in Easton. And I'm pretty sure Jamal can touch base on it. Easton, about 10 years ago, Easton went through this whole thing where they started building these McMansions, these big, giant $700,000 houses. And Ken remembers. And what happened was Easton built all these McMansions. And what happened was, by building all these big, humongous houses, they eliminated their 1% of poverty level. So what happened was that they came back in Easton and they said, hey, you guys are now below the 1% of poverty level. You are losing this aid, that aid. You're losing this many teachers because you don't have no more low income percentage. And it was all wiped, and everybody was at the school meetings in Easton. They were pissed off because, well, they lost all these teachers. They lost all this aids and benefits because they no longer had low income. Can you get into that, Jamal? Because low income provides a lot for aid and things of that sort.
Yeah, it does. So what I could say is that, in Brockton, we're very dependent on state aid, and very specifically. So, for example, our general fund budget for this year is $493 million. And $274 million comes from state aid. So that's about a little bit more than half our budget is coming from state aid for our general fund. So therefore, it's important that we complete that census. And in Brockton, we didn't have 100% completion. I know it was an issue to get people to complete the census. A lot of times when I go door knocking, meeting people, and I love meeting my neighbors and people throughout Brockton, but very often people will just say, I don't know. When you say there's a budget hearing coming up, I did not know. Did you know that the U.S. Infrastructure Act that was passed by Joe Biden brought $9.5 billion of money to Massachusetts to improve our roadways? How much of that money is coming to Brockton? Well, we need more grant writers to apply for these programs. Currently, the city council hasn't passed a resolution to have the mayor or the CFO come before the city council to explain how much of that money is coming to Brockton. I don't think that we're getting our fair share. It starts by people not completing the census, and it continues when you see the performance of the city councilors not asking the right kind of questions or providing adequate oversight of the mayor to ensure these federal and state funds are coming to Brockton. So.
Wow. And there was another thing, too, that I'd heard in the city of Brockton. We had a big windfall from these dispensaries. These dispensaries that, they had only estimated a certain amount of money to come in from taxes. And Brockton ended up getting 4 times as much as they thought, to the point where they had to create a whole new budget to disperse these monies. Now, I haven't heard anything as to if they were able to come up with that yet. Maybe you can let us in on that, if they were able to come up.
Yeah, I can. So coincidentally, last night was a Brockton FinCom meeting where the CFO came before the city council. And what it is that, so Brockton's been collecting marijuana tax revenue since the fiscal year 2020. And the money is being spent through our general fund. But the thing is that the city council never created a stabilization fund to channel those funds for a specific purpose. They had a conversation about it in 2019, but they never fulfilled that purpose of creating a stabilization fund so the money can be channeled. Therefore, after about 3 years of generating revenue from marijuana, the city's never designated that money for a very specific purpose. So, for example, we've got coaches in the city of Brockton who facilitate the sports and athletics, and every single one of them will complain about how our fields, they're just not up to par. A lot of our kids, they're ashamed to have teams from out of town come to Brockton to see the condition of our fields, and they're saying we need to improve our fields. And the city councils are looking to the mayor, hey, where do we get the money? Now the thing is that if they would have created a stabilization fund, we could have had money readily available for youth sports, but that's not the situation. And so that has to do with, and I want to thank the city councilors for the work they've done, but we need to come full circle and make sure that we complete activities as we intended. In this case, they should have set up a stabilization fund. So we've gone about 3 years where the city of Brockton has never designated funds from marijuana for a specific purpose. So it just goes into the general fund.
Right, and I heard that they had to because they got to do this because they weren't expecting to get as much money as they did, and we saw this coming. So how can people follow you and get ready to support you for this upcoming election?
Yeah, so what I'd say is step one is that, in order to improve the city of Brockton, it's important. It's not one man or one person that's going to really make a difference. It's all of us. So we're going to need everybody on board, really becoming more attentive of what's going on in the city council. The weeks to pay attention to the council most is this week coming up. Next week, the week of June 15th, there'll be budget hearings where you get to hear the department heads and how they've been using their funds for the past year and what are their plans for the year coming up. So pay attention to that. And also at the end of the year, when they determine the tax rate classification, determine what the tax rate's going to be for the different property classifications. Those are the 2 weeks that you always want to pay attention to see what's going on. But if you want to learn more about my campaign, you can reach out to me directly at 774-428-1525. You can visit my website, voteforjamal.com. I'm specifically fighting for safe schools, safe streets, safe neighborhoods, and an improvement in the quality of our roadways. In order to reduce the tax burden on residential property owners, it's important that we promote our business environment. And the first way to do that is improve the quality of our roadways. It doesn't make sense that a business owner is going to invest millions in Brockton if the roads to their business are in dilapidated condition. And so that's why one of the cornerstones of my campaign is just focusing on the road improvement. Right now is a very time-sensitive period where really municipalities in Massachusetts have a 4-year window where they can apply to Massachusetts Department of Transportation to get some of this $9.5 billion to improve their infrastructure. I want to make sure Brockton gets their portion of the pie and isn't left out. And so that's why I'm running for city council at large. If you want improvement in public safety, if you're a city employee and you want to see improvement in salaries, that's what I'm going to be advocating for. I got to highlight this. When you look on the Brockton City Employment website, all too often they've got admin roles that only make $36,000 a year. That's not a livable wage. The city of Brockton should be an employer of choice. In order to be an employer of choice, we got to make sure that we're adequately compensating employees so that they can deliver the services that residents so desperately need. And so that's why I'm going to be advocating that no city hall employee that works a full-time job should be making less than $55,000 a year. I sent an email to the mayor already about this. I didn't get a response back, but it's okay. That's typical in Brockton. But I hope he at least got the message that these kind of roles should always start at least $55,000 a year at a minimum. But I'm hoping that more Brocktonians reach out and get involved. I want to highlight that in Brockton, 80% of registered voters do not vote. So we're talking about 50,000 people. So if you're looking at the person next to you in Brockton, there's a high probability that person's not voting. And the thing is that even if you're not participating in our civic life and city government or in the improvements of Brockton, you really have a role to play. So the next time you drive over a pothole and you say, "Oh man, I hate these roads," well, I want you to save that energy and use it every day in advocating for an improvement on our roadways by reaching out to your city councilor. Reach out to me because we need everybody on board. Thank you.
Any questions for this guy while he hangs on and does some topics with us? Anything you guys want to ask him or?
No, I'm good.
All right, cool. All right, so we're going to get right into the news booth. Jamal's going to actually hang in with us, and I got to bring this story up. Stoughton police, and this is a personal story. Please keep an eye out for a missing elderly man. His name is Joseph Clark. He is actually the father of my kid's mother's best friend, Lisa Clark. He has not been seen since yesterday. He was last driving a 2009 red Chevrolet HHR, mass plate 676 CG5. That's 676 CG5. It's a Chevy HHR 2009 red. If you guys go on the Facebook page for the booth and stuff, you'll see a picture of Joseph Clark, and it's pretty scary stuff. And I'm hoping that we can find him safe and sound. Also, this is another one that's pissing me off. I'm going to keep this up here. Brockton High, and let me get rid of this one here. Brockton High had their graduation, and I want to say congrats to all the graduates of Brockton High. But when I went to Google for the story for Brockton High's graduation this past weekend, the top story was something from October 24th. The second story was about the stabbing. The Google Analytics should have been the Brockton High graduation right at the top, and it isn't. And that saddens me because the Brockton High graduation should have been at the top of the Google Analytics list. People, we need to do a better job in promoting the good stories of Brockton, and this has been a thing that's gone on in this city for far too long. And I'm just upset with it, and I know you agree with me, Jamal, on that one. Here on the east side of Brockton, we're getting a Five Below, but Bank of America is now closing up branches. The east side branch is closing, but opening up a bigger branch in Westgate Mall. The rumor is that Dunkin' Donuts that's on Electric Avenue and Crescent Street is going into the Long John Silver's that's been closed for like the longest time. I'm applauding that because that's been a traffic nightmare for the longest time on the east side of Brockton. Also, big mention to my cousin, his wife, Celeste Watkins-Hayes. She's been named the interim dean of the Gerald Ford School. So big congrats to my family member on that one. It's a big job for her to be named dean. And let's get into this one today because R Squared just wrote a story over at the Corridor in regards to today. And he brings up a very good discussion. D-Day, June 6, 1944. This is probably goes down as one of the top 5 military offensives in history. A lot of lives were lost, but that storming of Normandy, those beaches, has been in a lot of movies. But Rob, you brought up a great discussion in regards to the human emotion, the human the heroicism in on that day. And you asked the question, Rob, but that happened today. And at first you threw me off because I was like, well, what is he getting at? And I said, well, I can, but then you took it deeper. And I'm going to let you explain to this because people, if you haven't been over to the Corridor yet, this is a great piece. And you pose a really good question with the way we are today in this world, and it leads into the legal booth. But I'm going to introduce R Squared, and I'm going to let him talk about this piece he wrote in regards to D-Day.
Yeah, so of course everybody remembers D-Day. You know, people have studied it one way or another, whether you've seen the movies, read the books, school. And the fact is, Tom Brokaw coined the phrase "the greatest generation." It was probably one of the best phrases created by a journalist, and it rings true. With the sacrifices of the World War II generation were amazing. And the fact is, you had Americans of all types, right? Everybody, no matter where you were from and what you did and who your family was, supported the war effort. And so when we think about D-Day, we think about the thousands and thousands of troops that stormed the beaches, knowing that they were running up against German machine guns and mortar rounds, and that the casualty rate was going to be something that would be atrocious. And they did it because it was their duty, it was their promise, it was their commitment to each other, it was the way to win the war, and they were committed to the ideals that we were fighting for. And so, we know that, and we commemorate it, and I think people are very thankful for it. The question that I raise is, as next year is the 80th anniversary of this. So as we're a couple of generations past, and our country has changed dramatically, is the question would be, how would we respond to that type of an emergency now? If it were to occur, would the American people rally the way we did in World War II? And keep in mind, as we recognize the sacrifice and service of the troops, the American people had to sacrifice. We had rationing in this country. That's not something we're used to. And so the American people accepted not just the blood and treasure of war, but rationing, food and oil and what have you, and everything coming out of the Depression. So the question is, what would we do today in a national crisis? Would the American people unite? Because we have never been, well, people would argue whether we've ever been this divided politically, socially, and otherwise right now. That's a debate for another time, perhaps, but we are incredibly divided, whether it's the most ever or not. And so the question becomes, what if we faced a national crisis? Could we count on people to accept that sacrifice? It may not be rationing per se, but something similar. Would we do that? Could we unite together despite our divisive nature right now and fend off this enemy? And so what I was doing an analysis of is, what have we seen recently from the American people to give us evidence as to whether or not we could survive that type of national crisis, whether it's a natural crisis, a foreign invasion of some kind. We take for granted that we're safe over here, and for the most part we have been. But that's not a guarantee. China's not going to invade us in 2024. But what if we were to get into a war with China? How would we respond? Would we lose interest in 6 months because it was too difficult, or would we unite the way we did in World War II to do that? And so, anecdotally, looking at recent examples of national crises, national challenges, how did we respond to them? And so, I only went back a couple of years because we had the COVID-19 pandemic, right? And look, everybody had different ideas about what that was, how serious it was, and depending on whether you had family with illness or other economic challenges, how you responded to it. But the fact of the matter is, it was a national crisis, and it could have. When it first started, if you all remember March of 2020 and the first few months, we were predicting 50 million, 100 million Americans could die from this thing. That's what we were thinking. Thank God that didn't happen because we got a vaccine and we did some things. But look at the divisiveness, right? Instead of coming together, we had politicians using it to create the same divisive wedge issues that they used. We had other civic leaders or other people using it for self-service interests. And at the end of the day, we really didn't come together as a people. But for Operation Warp Speed and the development of the vaccine, we would have faced the type of death and illness that we were afraid of. And so, it's interesting looking at that as an area where we really should have come together to protect our own neighbors, right? Our friends, our family, our neighbors, our coworkers, and we didn't do it, right? We didn't have the patience to do it. We started going back to our self-interest. And so that was one example that I used. The other one, I talk about January 6th a little bit. I know we talk a lot about that on the show, but this is a different way of looking at it than what we normally talk about. Because what you have there, regardless of politics, it doesn't matter who you voted for or anything like that. We saw plain and simple, that these groups, whether you want to say that they were led by the domestic terrorists or whether they were everyday people involved, it doesn't matter at this point. The fact is, we saw what happened. We saw the savage beating of law enforcement. We saw the invasion of the Capitol. We saw the destruction of property. We saw the threatening of elected officials. We saw the prevention of government operations, including the certification of the election, at least temporarily. And so the question becomes, how did we respond to that crisis, right? That should have been the straw that broke the camel's back. And, I hate cliches, but I'm going to use that one. But that should have been, right? That should have been because, all politics should have ended at that point. And it did for a day, right? You had Republicans like Lindsey Graham and others that, said, I'm done with this, I'm out, whatever. And that lasted about 24 hours. And then they went right back to the same MAGA crap. So, the fact of the matter is even January 6th didn't wake us out of our funk, right? We went right back after a day. Everybody was horrified for about 24 hours, and we went right back to it. And so, look, these could have been existential threats to our future, right? If we had those type of casualties from COVID, if we had the overthrow of our government, what would we have done? And so that was what I was writing about today, was trying to do an analysis of what type of national crisis, what would we do? It doesn't have to be a Chinese or Russian invasion or a North Korean nuclear missile. I mean, there are a lot of things that could happen to us. Are we ready? Would we come together finally? And I'm not so sure. After our recent history, I'm not so sure.
I would argue that we actually would unite when it comes to conventional warfare and having a foreign enemy. I think that I could see the whole nation being united against that. I think what was circumstantially different about COVID is because this was something out of the ordinary within our lifetime. I appreciate, we had a pandemic that happened in the 1920s, but in terms of like the people who are alive and living, they've never experienced something like that. And so there was a lot of misinformation in the public domain that led people with mixed interpretations on the threat and how severe it is. And we saw how it came to rationing toilet paper, and all of a sudden that became a cause for people arguing, fighting in Walmart. But when it comes to conventional warfare, I think historically the nation and nations usually unite. And what's unique about America compared to many countries, not all countries, but many countries, is that in the United States, we're all proud of our history. Just generally, we have a proud history, and people have a proud national identity. And not all countries have that level of pride in their national identity. And so I think that a common enemy would definitely unite us.
Yeah, I agree with you, Jamal. And what I wrote in the piece was two things. I said, first of all, if we faced a common enemy, such as an invasion from a country like China, we absolutely would unite. That I was confident in. And I was also very confident in our ability of our military to respond to that, because, there are a lot of problems in the military. You had military members participating or supporting January 6th, but I do believe that we could count on the rank and file military and leaders to do that. So I agree with you wholeheartedly in that regard. The issue was, what about, other types of crises? What would it take to bring us together, and could we rally? And that's where I have some question about that. But I definitely think if, and I hate to keep using this example, I'm not predicting it's going to happen, but if we were invaded by China, the American people would finally unite. But, what shy of a foreign invasion, it's interesting to think about what would be the threshold and how would we do it. And the other point that I make, and you said it very well, is social media. You talked about the misinformation out there. That's part of the problem, right? That's where our challenge of divisiveness comes from, because instead of, and I'm not saying the media is perfect, but people are getting their information from incredibly bad sources, conspiracy theories and what have you, and that's interfering with a common understanding of even what we're talking about. And so if we were to come together to battle some kind of challenge, we don't even all understand what the challenge is because of the misinformation out there. So I agree with you on that.
Well, it's funny that you guys, you say that, but the thing is I look at how people responded just to the Ukraine invasion, and that's why when I read Rob's piece on the corner, I was like, wow, he's right, because as Americans, we were divided on the simple invasion of Ukraine. There were people who backed in this country, they backed Russia invading Ukraine, and we had a bunch of people on social media who were all for Ukraine. It was like, wow, we're really divided right now. It's kind of scary. Ken, anything you want to add to that?
Yeah, very simply, I think the problem is, if you look at the Greatest Generation and now, there was that generation of feeling that we were part of a community. And what happened in Peoria had an effect. It happened in Chicago, it happened in San Francisco, had happened in New York, etc. We're all in the same boat. We all got to pull together. We don't have to like it, but as my beloved mother used to say, I told you to do it, I didn't ask you to like it. Today we have the exact opposite. We have a sense that what mine is mine and what's yours is negotiable. We see this all the time when we're dealing with the issues are, how does this affect me? I don't like it. For example, I'll give you a prime example, if I may go into the pandemic. There were people screaming and yelling about wearing a mask in public because it bothered them. Okay? Yes, it was a pain in the neck, and I hate wearing a mask in public, okay? But let me tell you something. I had a cousin, I said this before, who was doing a residency down at Vanderbilt Medical Center at Vanderbilt University. She went to work every day looking like she was ready to tour freaking Chernobyl. She had triple masks, which means she had a mask, and then she had a mask and a face shield.
Yep.
She had boots, she had double gloves, she had double gowns, okay? She would lose, on average, 5 to 10 pounds a day simply in sweat and water weight, okay? Now, when she showed up for work, the first thing she had to do was go to decam facility and get scrubbed down. And then she had to do this at the end of the shift, get scrubbed down again. This is a 30-year-old woman. She is a physician. Okay? She did that every single day, twice a day, for the 2.5 years during the pandemic. And then she never complained. She said, this is the life I've chosen. I want to be a physician. I'm dealing with people at risk. This is the sacrifice I'm making for the greater community. We don't have that today. We have a bunch of Karens running around screaming about. Okay? Give you an example. There's an excellent physician, Dr. Q-Tab, who I know. Abbas Q-Tab. And he decided to post on Facebook why it was important to wear a mask. And he decided to dumb it down for even people on Facebook like myself and Sinister One. He made the example of someone urinating on someone's leg. That's two people not wearing a mask. Then one person wearing a mask is the person urinating on someone's leg, the other person wearing a pair of jeans. And the third stage was both men wearing trousers or jeans, and the person urinates, well, it affects only himself. I don't see the level of dedication to our community that we saw in that greatest generation. Our good friend Rob Resnick. For those of you who don't know, Rob spent 24 years in the U.S. military. He has got a first-hand view of every bleep hole in the freaking universe. Okay? He never complains about it. I've talked to him about it privately. We've been friends for 30 years. Because I asked him, but he'll never volunteer that information. It was his duty. He was a serving military officer. He goes where they send him. Doesn't complain. Okay? Did his time. He's retired. He's now teaching, an excellent teacher. Okay? He felt it was important to serve his country and go where the military said. He never complained once in the 30-odd years I've known him. I've got people, when I'm on the planes, if they get hassled by too much carry-on luggage, you would think we're trying to throw them out at the back of the plane at 20,000 feet without a parachute. Okay? That's the problem.
Yeah.
We've become cocooned.
Perfect.
I'm not saying it's altruistic. That's the problem.
I would add another perspective, because one of the things that I was interested in when Jamal was introducing himself in his campaign, he talked about safe schools. And I think when you talk about safe schools, this is my interpretation, so correct me if I'm wrong, please, but you probably are talking, at least in some degree, school shootings and that type of safety, right?
Yeah, specifically last month at Brockton High School, there was an incident where there were a few kids, I think it was 3 kids that were victims.
3 females,
being knifed. And this happened in broad daylight, and it was recorded on a phone. And 5 people were arrested. And what's even more startling was that not only did this happen at Brockton High School, but when the kids were sent to Good Samaritan Hospital, the knifing continued because someone had the audacity to go to the hospital and continue with this campaign. Now, listening to this situation, I just was so firm that in order to have safer schools, we need to have a root cause analysis. We need, my opinion was that I feel that the mayor should be documenting and making it public. Tonight actually is a school committee meeting at Brockton High School, and I hope they're talking about this. Mr. Mayor, where is the documentary report about what happened? How did this occur? Were there preventative steps we could have taken? I don't think school safety is limited to ensuring there's metal detectors or there's police on site. I think it also has to do with ensuring that we have after school programs for kids so that they have something to look forward to, as well as there was something that that really resonated with me when I heard your story about serving in the military. I never served in the military, but my father did, and he fought in World War II, and he would tell me about his experience being in the military, and that also it had a huge influence on me becoming a volunteer at my local city hospital when I was in high school. And I feel that it's important that high school students get that type of they do community volunteerism, so that they have a stake in their community, and their parents are really building up and instilling in them the importance of giving back to their community and being aware of how can we improve our community. And maybe that's part of what we need to ensure that when they're on their own, that incidences like this are not happening. I'll pause.
We got a lot of.
You're right, and what I was going to say is, first of all, thank you for your father's service, especially being in World War II. That's just amazing, and I can see that resonates with you. The reason, I agree with you on school safety, and the reason I brought it up is because to me, that's it's not the closest thing. It is a bona fide national crisis, right? I mean, if you look at the hundreds and hundreds of shootings and the thousands of victims, whether injured or not just those injured or killed, but those who experienced it and the permanent psychological damage that has to them. It seems to me that would be something that should unite us. We may not agree on 100% of what to do, but we should be, overwhelmingly fighting for a minimum, amount of things that we do. And yet that remains a divisive issue. So I think that's just another illustration. And I recognize that, in recent polls, 94% of the population support some of these basic safety measures. And it's just a few elected officials that are holding it up. But nevertheless, we reelect those officials. So, it's one of the challenges that I would use to support Ken's theory about community involvement, community support, and an example at the local level, that this is what we have to be focusing on.
We've got a lot of people in the chat. I got to say hi to Vianna Marie. Bill Kurtzinger, who I met and hung out with last year and this year. He's in the chat watching. Jake Sykes is in there. Elizabeth Laszlo says that there were 2 kids hit by a car today. We need to protect our streets. Trust me, Elizabeth, I know, because I'm one of these people who was hit by a car back in February on Crescent Street, just 2 blocks from my house, and I'm scheduled for surgery. Joe Alston, what's going on? Thank you for tuning in. But before we get into our next topic, I got to say, one of the things about the schools, and when this stabbing happened at Brockton High, I said, you know what? The principal had it where everybody's bags were being checked before school, but what happened was that kids were being late to class because the checks were taking too long, and it kind of went by the wayside, and I get it. The problem for me that I want to touch on, and I don't want to spend too long on this because we got a lot of show left, is I think it also begins in the home. And I think bad parenting is part of the problem with society today, and I'm just going to put it out there. You got a lot of parents out there who are friends with their children before being parents. I remember when I used to leave the house, my dad and my mom would always tell me, you never know who we know. And if you're caught doing something, that person would call my dad and say, hey, Mr. Hayes, I seen your son doing this, and I seen your son doing that. And guess what? I came home to an ass whooping. Today, parents are too quick to stick up for their kids. The teachers are to blame for their bad behavior. I get tired of hearing that. Here's the problem. The problem is right on social media. You can see it. When you see a parent who can take 2 hours a day to practice and get dances down for TikTok with their kid or their infant, yet they can't sit down for 20 minutes and do their homework with their kid. That's the problem. Let's be real. It doesn't just start with the school. It doesn't just start with the politicians. It starts with the parenting at home, period.
Yeah, I second what you just said. I mean, when I think about, I feel that my parents, I was really happy coming up. And I remember when I got done with school, the very first thing I had to do when I got home is I had to do my homework. And my father would check my homework and he would ask me, hey, how was school? And he would listen to how I would respond to that question. And he made it a point to understand, he would track and monitor the curriculum so that I was always performing in school. And I feel that, parenting isn't just about having a child. It's about tracking and monitoring your child's performance in school, because it really, when you're underneath the age of 18, your job is to be a full-time student. And if you don't acknowledge that, then you're really missing out on the point here. And so parenting really is key here. And so to be a good parent, you're really tracking and monitoring your child's whereabouts and taking full responsibility.
Yeah, and I agree. And we're going to get into this because we're going to get into the legal booth. There is a story coming up about this. But in the legal booth, Oath Keeper, and this is flying under the radar, Oath Keeper leader Stewart Rhodes gets 18 years for his actions on January 6th. He is the leader of the Oath Keepers. If you guys didn't know about what happened on January 6th, the Oath Keepers were set up in perimeters around the Capitol with snipers. They had snipers in the friggin' trees, people. So when people come up to me and they talk about, oh, it wasn't as bad as you think, Sinister One. Oh, it's not that bad. It is bad. And R Squared has talked about it on the show. We don't want to beat a dead horse, but this is what R Squared had wanted. He wanted the big fish to get the book thrown at him to let people know kind of, we're not putting up with this. So R Squared, do you agree with the 18 years that the Oath Leader got? Or do you feel like
he was facing, I believe the maximum punishment authorized for what he was convicted of was 25 years. That would have been better.
Really? Ooh. Ken, you're a defense attorney, but your thoughts, because you said these people deserve, and you're a defense attorney, but you said these people deserve what they get.
Absolutely. And I agree with Robert. First of all, he's correct. He could have gotten up to 25 years. That was the maximum penalty he was facing. I don't think that's enough. I think he should have been in life in prison.
Ooh.
Or possibly the death penalty like the rest of them. This was an act of insurrection. This was an act of treason. You don't get to overthrow the government through violence. If you want to overthrow the government, we have a very simple way. We do it every 2 years in this country. It's called elections. Okay? Now, depending on what state you're in, you can make the argument that we have elections at some place, at some level in this country every year. Okay? Not every state has the elections the same year. Okay, we are one of the few modern industrial democracies that has governance at such varied levels: local, county, state, federal. Think about that. Think about all the different elections you could go to in one given year.
And make a change. Yep.
Okay, if you're that excited. You can vote in your local, and I hope you do, your local city, town, or village election. Then you got the county elections. Then you got the state elections, the 5 constitutional officers in Massachusetts, plus House and Senate reps. Then you got the federal elections. And then you had various referendum that come around from year to year.
That's right. Yep.
Okay. One of the biggest ones was the marijuana one. I mean, if you had told me when I began practicing law in 1992, Rob started practicing in 1991, that we would actually still be practicing law when the Commonwealth of Massachusetts decided to decriminalize and legalize marijuana, we would have thought you were absolutely, completely insane. There's no way it's going to happen. Yet people got together and decided, hey, enough of this nonsense. We need to take our resources and put it towards more serious problems. Whether you agree with it or not, that's what happened.
And Ken, you're
How many people died? No, let me ask you this question. How many people died in Massachusetts over that ballot initiative? How many?
Zero.
And Ken, you're a defense attorney. I got to just ask you real quick before we get to the next topic. Since this has passed and you've seen the legalization of marijuana, how much has the cases dropped in court for, getting pulled over with a roach in the car? I mean, cops have got to be kind of relieved too. There's no more showing up to court for these minuscule cases on BS.
I've been doing this job for 30 years. Do you know how many marijuana cases, and I'm going to leave aside trafficking cases.
Okay.
I'm not talking about commercial trafficking marijuana cases. Different. I'm talking about
just possessions and
possession with intention that I tried in 30 years.
How many?
0. They wouldn't let us try cases like that. They got a limited amount of time, and they are not going to waste their time on a stupid pot case. Please dismissals. Sometimes the lab wouldn't even bother to test it because they got heroin and fentanyl and crack cocaine to test. It clogged up our system. No, it just wasn't worth their time. Now, did I have cases where there was a marijuana along with a more serious thing? Yeah, sure, all the time. I'm talking about standalone marijuana cases. I'll give you okay. But I'm going back to your previous point. No, I think that was clearly appropriate. I don't think he got long enough, in my humble opinion. But, quote James Francis Xavier Deneen, the former Associate Justice of Brockton District Court. It's very nice, Mr. Diesenhof. You may be right, but I'm the one wearing the black robe. So the judge made his decision. Got to abide by it.
Chris Gagney's in the chat. He says, imagine if the marijuana industry advertised as much as online betting. Don't get me started. That's a whole different show. Also in the legal booth, guys, and I got a question from my legal guys here. A 14-year-old girl down in Maryland is being charged with setting up an attempted hit on another student on a school bus. 3 teen boys have also been arrested. I always thought that a crime that was to be committed on a bus was automatically a federal charge. I also thought a hit was also a federal charge. And my other question to Ken and R Squared is, back in the day, when you had crimes, if the kids were minors, we all agreed they were to be kept safe. Their identities was not to be known. But I feel like with the way society is today, the way social media is today, and when you see a crime as heinous as this, where this boy would have been killed on a school bus, but the gun jammed, is it time to say that we shouldn't hide identities of minors anymore? And I know this is a hot debate. I know there's a lot of people who are going to say we need to still, but come on now. These kids are old enough to know to set up another person to be murdered on a school bus. I'm sorry. You can say, yeah, let's make the decision to try them as adults. No. I feel like there should be something like this should just automatically, everybody should be aware. Ken, you're a defense attorney. I'm going to let you speak on this first because you would have to defend these psychos.
To answer your first question, no. Merely because something occurs on a school bus does not make it a federal offense. Now, under the Patriot Act, and I actually had a case like that, certain attacks that occur on school property can be charged under the Patriot Act, but those are far and few between. Those mainly deal with school bombings and stuff like that, and it's mainly triggered as adults. It's very important to understand the federal system has no juvenile section. That's why juveniles almost are never charged in federally. There is no juvenile court in the federal system. Everyone's charged as an adult. Can you be charged with a federal offense if you commit a crime on school property? Absolutely. This would mainly be in the realm of 3 areas. Number 1, civil rights violations. Number 2, acts of terrorism. Like, for example, let's say for whatever reason, I'm not suggesting you would ever do that, you decide to plant a bomb at Brockton High School.
Mm-hmm.
The use of a weapon of mass destruction or mass casualty on any type of school can be charged under the Patriot Act. And the third, if there is a federal connection, there are certain schools that are located on military bases or federal reservations that can be charged federally. But those are exceptions, not the rule. Now, I hate to burst your bubble. And you know I love you dearly, Sinister One. We've been friends for over 20 years, but you're full of guacamole. The reason we have juvenile courts is, and this has been documented for going on almost 80 years, the human brain doesn't fully develop to the age of 21.
25.
25? I thought that was 21. All right. Well, I'll refer to Colonel Resnick. 25. It is generally accepted that while the brain is developing in a youth, we will treat them differently than a fully formed adult. Now, there are certain crimes that are so heinous, we charge them as adults even if they are juveniles. They're known as youthful offenders, or YO cases. Most states have a version of it. Maryland has one, so does Massachusetts. The reason we keep the identities of juveniles confidential is because their brains have not been fully formed and they need to be protected. Are there cases where there are exceptions? Sure. You can get someone who is, just because they're juvenile, the judge can make a ruling they can release the information to the public, but those are far and few between. No, you're absolutely wrong.
So you don't think that this is premeditated though? This is Go ahead,
I'm not suggesting it's not. I'm not suggesting it's not. It's premeditated, and they should have the book thrown at them. But to take, again, this is a case of like we refer to as man biting dog. There may be 10,000 dog bite cases where a dog bites a human. And there may be one case of a man biting a dog, but that story of man by dog will be all over the newspapers. Everyone will forget dog biting a person. You cannot let your emotions be swayed by these outlier cases. End of story. I've done juvenile work. I've had people charged seriously with very serious offenses, both violence-based and sexually based offenses. And no one ever thought we should disclose their identities to the general public. That doesn't mean they're not known to law enforcement. That doesn't mean they're not known to counselors. They're not known to attorneys. It's just that we don't give them to the general public. What purpose would it serve to release this information to the public? What is the societal benefit? As we talked earlier in the show, how does the community benefit by having these individuals' names released to the public?
Because it keeps other younger kids from doing the same thing. That's where I'm at this point. I saw R Squared with his hand up, so I want to be able to hear his.
Keith, hold on a second. Let me finish this. You have two wonderful boys.
Yes, I do.
I love them both. Wonderful men. They've really become wonderful men. At that age, do you really think anything, when they were teenagers, did they not have poor impulse control? And do you really think they thought about their actions?
They had typical teenage impulse stuff, but to set another student up on a school bus to perform a hit when you wear hoodies and bring a R Squared, I just got to hear from you because I saw your hand up.
So, as a lot of our listeners know, I teach these areas in various curriculums in the universities where I was teaching, including juvenile justice and criminology, where we study these issues. And the whole nature of the juvenile justice system is designed that because the brain continues to function until around age 25, or for some of us never, but until age 25 in the average person. And the whole idea of the juvenile justice system was bent on rehabilitation and not punishment. And that was because just the very nature of being convicted of a felony in our society is stigmatizing and has lasting consequences. And so the confidentiality, as well as the focus on rehabilitation in the juvenile justice system, is an idea focused on the fact that because most of these offenses would be born of immaturity and as you said, in impulse control and other issues because of the fact that they haven't fully developed yet, we give people a chance. We protect them and focus on giving them a chance to overcome those mistakes. However, and the prosecutor in me, I think, would come down differently than Ken in this regard. For those offenses that are particularly heinous and violent and adult-oriented in nature, the prosecution, the judge, and even the defense, which is rare, but even the defense can suggest moving the case from juvenile court to the criminal court, the adult system. And in a case like this, I think that's what that transfer system is all about. I would certainly, I don't know all the facts of this case, but as you portrayed it to us, Sinister One, I think this is a case that should be tried as an adult. If you have high school students that set up a hit to murder a student on the school bus using a firearm, putting everybody on the bus at risk, both from injury and from emotional scarring, and to commit the act of murder in general, whatever the dispute was between these people, this is an adult crime. This is a heinous crime. This is a violent crime. I would treat them in the adult court system, and that would make them susceptible to those convictions and those punishments. This is not the youthful indiscretion that the juvenile justice system is for. I think the default should be the juvenile justice system. We need to give kids a chance to overcome this so that they can grow and mature and learn and become, productive members of society. I don't know what's wrong with these particular kids, and maybe there are facts out there that would change my opinion, and maybe there are facts out there that would affect what happens to them in adult court. But this is a criminal. This is felony prosecution.
I'm gonna let Jamal before I get in, because this spurned a lot of friggin' people in the chat. Oh my God, Jamal, you want to talk about this?
Well, so I mean, I guess you got to evaluate on a case by case basis. I'm more leaning towards the argument that Rob just presented. That this is a very heinous crime, and so it should be evaluated in that. But once again, I don't know all the facts around this, so I do acknowledge that people grow, mature, and change. And I am a believer that people do change, and people they may not have a right, but I think as a society, I like to I like to be open-minded about it. I think that it's important that we protect our young people, and protecting the identity of young people is important, especially when they're involved in something that gets national attention.
Like this story.
Like this story, because we don't really know the role of each individual in this instant, and it would be a shame if they were targeted by somebody who just saw part of a story online and just decided they want to act on that little bit of information. And for that reason, I think that young people's identities should be protected.
Well, the sad thing is that they have the camera footage from the bus, but we've got a lot of people in the chat. Frank Zanowski, Z-Man, he says the funny thing is that a teen can join the military, but they can't be accountable for their crimes because of their brain development. Come on, Z-Man says. Tom McGinty says, how about they've developed enough mentally that they can pull off this crime and know that they're going to beat the adult charges? In other words, it's premeditated, and because they know they're minors, that they could beat these. So in other words, he's saying that there's a possibility that they could. We don't know that. They could. But again, I want everybody in the chat. Wow, good conversation. I didn't think this was going to spawn that much stuff here. But let's get back into this. In the entertainment booth, Celine Dion cancels all upcoming shows, will never tour again. Why? Because Celine Dion has stiff person syndrome. Ken can speak on this. Stiff person syndrome is what my mother was afflicted with. It's a very rare disease. It only affects 1 million people in the world. It is a ravaging disease. My mother suffered with it, and finally, my mother said no more. It is a disease where your body stiffens up like a wooden soldier, and you have these spasms, and it's triggered by sound. It's triggered by all these things. The spasms were so bad in my mother that it wore out the cartilage in her hip and in her knees, to where she had to have hip replacement. It is a very ravaging disease. My prayers go out to Celine Dion. It's going to be a tough battle. Ken, we had a major legal battle with my mom in regards to someone who was pertaining to her care. But, my mom ended up coming to my house, and I took care of her at home, so it's not even worth getting into it. But again, I thank Ken, because Ken helped me with a legal matter that was huge. And I remember him saying that, Keith, whatever happens here, it's about to set precedent, because it was a big issue in regards to my mother's health care. And I thank Ken for walking me through that, helped me with it. And my mother eventually did end up in my home, where I took care of her until she passed away. Sports booth. Brad Stevens is going to retain the core team, including Joe Mazzulla, and they're going to add Sam Cassell as a veteran assistant coach. Exactly what I was saying last week when people were talking about they should fire this guy, they should trade Jaylen Brown, blah, 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 blah. And I'm like, look, take the Bruins, for example. Everybody wanted to fire people at the Bruins level. And guess what? The Florida Panthers are in the Stanley Cup championships, and the Florida Panthers are actually a pretty good team. And this whole thing about the NBA, Charles Barkley said it. Living, dying by the threes makes for a horrible game. Guys in the 90s that we grew up watching, you drove to the hole, you took the foul, and you got the and one. If you didn't get the two, at least you got the one for the foul. And the NBA is overpaid guys shooting from outside the perimeter now. And that's the problem with the NBA right now. You live and die by the three, and I think it's the most stupidest thing. It's got to be changed. Something's got to be done. The Cardinals released DeAndre Hopkins, wide receiver. Oh, go ahead, Squid.
Question on the Celtics. I watched just about every game of that Celtics Heat matchup. And by the way, I was rooting for the Celtics, even though I was moving up from Florida. And so the debate here in the Newton Resnick household was whether or not to keep Al Horford, whether or not he was really, part of the solution or part of the future of this team. So I'm wondering what you think of that. I agree with everything you said. I'm the one who spoke up about agreeing with Charles Barkley on that, the state of the NBA and the Celtics offense. But what do you think about Horford?
Yeah, I think
Brad Stevens wants to keep the team. Keep Horford or not?
I think Horford's going to stay. I think Pritchard wants to go. I think you're going to see Pritchard gone. They're not going to re-sign Blake Griffin. He didn't do nothing all season. I thought that they had got him for the playoffs to give Al a rest, but Al was actually shifting back and forth between him and Rob Williams. I've heard some people say get rid of Rob Williams. I'm like, no, you can't get rid of Rob Williams. He was one of the only guys playing defense on the court that whole series, so you can't get rid of Rob Williams. He was one of the guys. So I think you keep Horford. The question is does Horford want to stay around? He's an older guy. he may be ready to go. But let's see. I think the core is here. People who wanted to get rid of Mazzulla was thrust in as interim coach just before the season began. He didn't have time to get a coaching staff together or nothing. So to say let's fire this guy for making it to the finals, the Eastern Conference Finals is ludicrous. People, I don't get it. And the fact that DeAndre Hopkins was released without any compensation from me speaks volumes. You could have at least got a third round or something for DeAndre Hopkins, but just outright release the guy? Something's there. And as we all saw with the Raiders, Jimmy G, had surgery he didn't tell anybody about back in March, which now may void his contract with the Raiders, and the Raiders could be in a serious hole with no quarterback, depending how this all pans out. We're at 8:06, so I got to blow through this. Biden bombshells. Oh, man. The Biden fall. Now, my mom, when she was here, my mom fell twice. One time she broke her hip. Twice she broke her hip. And then I was told by the Visiting Nurse Association of Brockton, if your mother falls a third time in this house, by law, she is deemed to assist, and she has to go into a nursing home. And that's what happened. That's how my mother ended up in a nursing home, because they track falls. Now, this fall that happened at the Air Naval Academy graduation, Biden fell. They're claiming it was a sandbag he tripped over. But for me, we talked about this. We hinted at this on this show, that if there is an incident where Biden falls or trips, that question of his age is going to come in. And I feel like the Democrats dropped the ball on this one, because I think it's a valid concern. I'm sorry. Yes, I voted for Biden because he was the lesser of the two evils, and I did vote for Biden, but he's in his 80s. And, this isn't the first time he's fallen at a public event. This is like the third time. I'm going to let R Square talk on this one first, because it's a concern to me when your president-in-chief, your commander-in-chief falls at a public event, and, they try to put their spin on it, but it's an issue when you start talking about his age.
Well, yeah, I mean, look, most people, whether you're an occasional Democratic voter or a lifelong loyal party voter, a lot of people are uncomfortable with Joe Biden being at that age. Medically speaking, he's cleared, he's competent, and his negotiations with Kevin McCarthy shows his mind is still working at a high level. So the question is really about physical. And so, I suppose that's less important than his cognitive. But what you have here is, we were talking about social media before. You have sandbag gate now. Was there a sandbag? Was it put there on purpose? Was it an accident? It's funny what people are going to, have all this conjecture out there about that. Were they trying to, was somebody trying to create an incident where he might fall? Who knows? I don't get into that. I say that as tongue in cheek, because, this is exactly the thing that we need to avoid right now. The story is this: he tripped, he got right up. He bounced up. He continued right on like nothing happened. So that's the story. End of story.
Anyone else with it up? Ken's got his finger up. Go ahead.
Okay.
Uh-oh.
Some of you may not be old enough to remember a gentleman by the name of Gerald R. Ford. He was our president. And Gerald R. Ford was a klutz. As a matter of fact, there used to be a drinking game back in the 70s. And he took a shot of Jägermeister every time Ford tripped over his own 2 feet. If you go back and Google or go on YouTube and see some of the old SNL first season with
Chevy Chase,
who played Gerald Ford, that was his running gag. Every time he played Gerald Ford, he'd trip over something. Guys, give it a freaking rest. The man tripped. Okay, bingo, happens all the time. And as someone who has incredibly poor hand-eye coordination and could trip his own 2 feet getting up out of bed, I have some sympathy for the man, okay? And I'm not 83 years old.
Anything you want to add to that, Jamal?
Yeah, I mean, all I would say is that, so Joe Biden is the oldest U.S. president in American history. And so it's a fair question to ask. However, I'd say it's up to his cabinet and the Speaker of the House to identify if he's not competent and capable to deliver the services that he's been elected to do. So if that hasn't taken place, I think he deserves a chance to continue delivering his service. So I do not believe in age discrimination. I had a father who is 52 years older than me, and so I'm very sensitive towards making sure that senior citizens and our elderly population have an equal opportunity, just like the rest of us.
Good stuff. Also, Jesus, this one's for Rob. So I watched this video, and I was going to show it, but it can be actually self-explained. So down in Taiwan, they're doing these military operations, and I saw the video, and it was foggy. You couldn't see anything. And they mentioned this. And as the fog lifted, one of the Chinese warships almost collided with one of our U.S. warships, and now they're making this a big deal in the video that they showed, and I'll show it when we close out the show so you guys can see it. But you can hear the U.S. troops saying that these are international waters, blah, blah, blah. Trust me, in this day and age, you have all this stuff that monitors where stuff is and where they're at. But again, the fog was so bad, I can see. I mean, they're really making a big deal out of this. And I got to ask Rob. Rob was in the military. He knows about this stuff. I feel like that this story isn't as big as everybody is trying to make it out to be when I looked at the story about the fog cover and the Chinese warship as it cleared being so close. Is it possible to lose those bearings in a fog cover as deep? And they did say that area of the Taiwan international waters on that day was already overcrowded with warships as it was. So one guy said he can see how this happened, but there are people, they're using this as a way to build this stupid ass platform. Is it capable, Rob, for that fog to lift and just to be at the wrong place at the wrong time?
If you're talking about the incident from just the last couple of days where the Chinese warship came within 150 yards, there was no fog, dude. That was all intentional. And if you look at the video, it's a sunny day, man. I mean, they could see each other. They saw it coming from miles away. And so this is something we've talked about on the show a few times. I've spoken about it. Ken gave an in-depth legal brief on freedom of navigation of the sea under international law. And the fact of the matter is this: China illegally and unrecognized under the law, under the facts, and under international community standards, has claimed the entire South China Sea as its territorial waters. That includes, of course, Taiwan, the Straits of Taiwan, international shipping lanes that have existed for decades. Obviously, the United States opposes that. The Philippines, Thailand, Singapore, Malaysia, Vietnam, all the countries in that region oppose that. They rely on those waters for minerals, for fishing, for shipping. And so the United States Navy, for the longest time, has done what's called freedom of navigation of the seas movements. This is how you show that you don't accept somebody's illegal claim of territorial waters. You sail through those waters. And it's the same thing for the skies over those waters, which happened a few days before with the surveillance plane and the Chinese fighter aircraft that, made it fly through its wake. You saw that on the news, same issue. And so the United States is not going to stop doing that because we don't recognize that China owns the South China Sea. Neither does the rest of the world recognize it. And so the US, the British, the French, the Australians, and again, all the countries in that region continue to do that. The difference is what Chinese warships do is they ram Vietnamese boats and sink them. They will not do that to our boats. So they're going to engage in this type of behavior. It's risky, it's aggressive, but you have very capable leaders who understand the game being played. Notice nobody shot at the other one, so it's going to be handled at the state levels. They'll make their complaints back and forth. This is going to go on for a long time. China is not going to give up its claim, and the rest of the world, and certainly not the United States and its allies and those other regions, countries in the region, are not going to accept it. They cannot economically or militarily. And so this is the way it's going to be. We hope that clear heads will prevail, that the leaders who direct these things are doing so with with a little bit of good judgment, so that there is not a fatal accident, because that's what could escalate. But these things are going to continue to happen. So to your point, Sinister One, it's not that big of a deal in the sense that this is one of many such incidents. It is a bigger deal in the sense that recently China has gotten a little bit more aggressive. They've gotten a little bit more close in the contact. And that's something that the leaders of the militaries are going to have to talk to each other and try to, put some safeguards in place. But this isn't stopping anytime soon.
Anybody want to add to that? Ken, I see your hand up.
Look, there is no question navigating in a crowded waterway in fog is extremely dangerous and extremely tricky. That's why navies have been using since the 40s some little invention you may have heard about it called radar, and also about sonar. And also there's something called a transponder. And all ships, both military and civilian, carry these things on their ship. And basically this allows you to plot the position of these ships on the high seas. There's a reason for that. So you can look at them, even if you can't see it at night or at fog, you know exactly where the ships are. Unless both the Chinese and the U.S. Navy were grossly negligent, they knew what they were doing. And the Chinese Navy does this all the time. They try to intimidate warships, and they try to play chicken. However, the Chinese are not alone in this. If you remember, a number of years ago, there was a geographical place called the Gulf of Sidra in the Mediterranean.
Yep.
Now, the Libyans, for those of you who don't know what the Gulf of Sidra is, the Gulf of Sidra was a huge gulf off the Libyan coast that on the east and west sections, it was like a giant U. And in the Mediterranean came basically from the Mediterranean right down into the Gulf. It was huge. It was hundreds of miles long and hundreds of miles deep. And the Libyans claimed that they own the entire Gulf of Sidra. The U.S. Navy says, au contraire, you go from 3 miles or 12 miles out from your landmass, and that's it. And so Muammar Gaddafi decided he was going to one day play chicken with the U.S. Navy and sent out a couple of MiG-25s. Rob, correct me on that if I'm right.
It was a lower number, but you're on track.
Okay. against a couple of F-14s.
Yeah, losing battle.
Guess what happened?
Yeah. They lost.
Tom Cruise didn't need to be there. Maverick didn't need to be there, but they shot down 2 planes because the U.S. Navy says, no, you come at us, we're going to warn you, but you lock on, we're going to shoot you down. Nothing personal, Sonny. It's business. And that's the same thing that happens in the South China Sea. China, for years, and this is probably going back, correct me if I'm wrong, Rob, early 70s, they making these claims, maybe earlier. And the U.S. Navy says, no, sorry, not going to happen. I hate to use the term dick measuring contest, but this is basically what it is. The problem is, you're not going to win a dick measuring contest with the U.S. Navy. Now, I have my problems with the U.S. military and the U.S. Navy especially. But let me tell you something. If you're in international waters and you're a foreign national, I don't care who you are, don't pick a fight with the U.S. Navy. You're going to lose.
Yeah.
They're really good at what they do.
Yep.
They may not do much, but they know how to navigate around and they know how to protect themselves.
They still got that aircraft carrier off the coast. Anything you want to add to that, Jamal, before we get out of here?
Yeah, so I'm going to repeat something said about 200 years ago by Napoleon Bonaparte. China is a sleeping giant. Let her sleep, but when she wakes, she will shake the world. Let me be clear. China has the largest military in the world. Now, they do not have the operational skill and military hardware as the U.S. military. I think our capacity is we got about 1.4 million men and women readily available. China's got 2 million. And when you leave America, and this is one thing I've learned because I lived in the UK for 10 years. When you leave America, you'd be surprised how many other countries will tell you that they got the greatest Navy in the world. And China is one of those countries. So, when we're in a circle full of Americans, it's easy to say that we got the greatest Navy in the world. I would say that, it's just something that we got to tread lightly. We got to be skilled. We got to make sure that we have a strong alliance around the world, because taking on China is not something the United States could ever do on its own, especially not on the other side of the planet.
Yeah, Jamal's exactly right. That's why our relationships with Australia and the other countries in the region is critically important, as well as the British and the French that maintain interest there. And also, China for the last 10 years or so has been dramatically increasing its navy. They have aircraft carriers where they didn't used to have those. They have submarines. They used to buy old Russian subs. Now they're building brand new nuclear subs.
Ooh.
So the Chinese navy is impressive and skilled and capable. They may not have the operational experience of some of the U.S. Navy or NATO navies, but yeah, an open water fight with China is not something we want and not something we can do alone. You're exactly right about that.
And we've talked about this on this show. You Jamal, I saw you.
Yeah. One last thing I want to say, though, because I am very sensitive about those territorial borders, and they come in many shapes and sizes. That but the United States should continue to patrol those waters, because when you don't and you step in, then you're really out of place. So you need to maintain a presence regardless.
Yep. Yeah, and then in our square, they said that we've talked about this. We got to get ready to get out of here, guys. I want to thank everybody for tuning in to the show. There's our hats, my beanies, completely sold out. I'll have to get them again this winter. Also, all the shows that I produce, Oscar Mike Radio on Thursday nights, Drafting the Circuits on Wednesday nights. Also, now I'm doing this FUBAR Studios. I'll be giving you guys some information on that. The 3K Heal-a-thon, domestic violence awareness, was a success. Lovern Gordon was on last week. She told me that the Heal-a-thon in Brockton went very well. The mayor actually put on a set of heels for a photo op, so kudos to him. June 15th, my artist Vianna Marie will be on the Hip Hop Happy Hour show, and on the 16th, she will be opening up for Scarlett in Rhode Island at the Halo Lounge in Rhode Island, and she will be performing on June 17th at the June 19th event at Brockton Fairgrounds. The Summer Solstice event takes place on June 21st, City Hall Plaza, and the Slingshot Beantown Express. This is the ride that your boy Sinister One puts on. Will take place July 29th, 2023. And again, Open Mic Fridays, for VFW 46, Bedford Street in Fall River, Mass. And there's the Kimberly Ann Empowerment Photography. And again, Momentum Tire Car Care in Hickory, North Carolina. Thank you for helping me out while I was down there. I needed a rear tire. They shipped it overnight to their location. They got it there. I went there the next morning. They put the tire on. And then they actually took a picture of Vengeance and put it on their website. And big ups to them. And that's it. I'm going to let my guest speak on this and give his stuff for this that you wanted people to visit the budget.
Yeah. One thing I want to highlight also is that on Saturday, June 17th, the DW Field Park Association will be hosting movie night in the park. So when you're on Oak Street, if you come through on the south entrance near the gazebo, myself and the other board members of the DW Field Park Association will be hosting a movie. We'll be playing Soul, and the NAACP of Brockton is actually sponsoring the event that night. The mayor is a big advocate of movie night in the park, and we've got approval to have food trucks. So for the first time in Brockton history, we're going to have food trucks. We're working to try and have them available for that movie night. And we'll be having movie nights every other Saturday this summer at the DW Field Park. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me. My phone number is 774-428-1525. Hope to hear from you soon.
And I'm glad that food trucks are back. I got to give a big happy birthday to my godson, Kevin Atwood, and a good friend, Amy Caldwell. But the food trucks, let's I don't want to get into the past. We can't beat the past up. But one of the reasons why we don't have food trucks in Brockton is because there was a ban put in place because there was a gentleman who owned a hot dog truck up behind the VA, and he was making a ton of money. And this ban was put into place, and it's been there for years. And I'm so glad that this ban has been taken off the books in the city of Brockton to allow food trucks to be at events in this city. I am actually part, I don't know if people who have been following, there's a DW group that if you sign up for it, they are sending out emails to residents of Brockton and asking you some of the things you would like to see in the park. Movies in the park was one of the things they asked about. people want to see the triathlon come back. For those who don't know, Ken knows, in Brockton, they used to have a triathlon here at the DW Field Park. It was very popular. People came from all over for this triathlon that happened because the DW Field Park is a diamond in the rough. They ran the bike course, they ran the course, and then they swam. I would love to see that triathlon come back to Brockton at the DW Field Park. The water's beautiful there. And I think it would be a nice addition to come back. I'm going to let these guys get ready to go around the horn. Jamal said his goodbyes. I'm going to let our square go next.
Hey, thanks, everybody. Thanks for listening. Stay informed. This show ends much too quickly.
Well, we went an hour and a half tonight, so this was a good show. Ken?
I'd like to thank all of our listeners, all 12 of you. Be safe. Happy summer. We'll see you next month.
And Rob is actually up here now, so I'm going to try to get a couple of shows done live here again at the Brockton Cable Access Studio. Also going to get Rob over to the Brockton Beer Company, as you see behind me here, to try some of those IPAs and those homemade brews. But one of the things, I'm not a big beer drinker. I'm a super lightweight people before we get out of here. But one of the things that they do have, they have the alcoholic waters here. And man, oh man, they got me feeling kind of,
Well, one thing I just want to highlight before we leave, though, is that the primary election this year is September 19, 2023. Early voting is available. If you want to do a mail-in ballot, that's an option. And the general election is November 7th, 2023. If you ever want to meet Jamal Brathwaite, you can always meet me at the Brockton Beer Company. I'm usually there on Fridays at 6 p.m. I'd love to meet you. Just feel free to just walk up to me and say hello.
And in a week, people, we have a very controversial person is going to be on the booth. Hamilton Rodriguez, who is running for mayor. And I know my inbox has been full of screenshots and some of the things that this man has been saying on social media. He's going to be here on the booth live on the booth. And I've been seeing the things that he's been saying, and I'm going to ask him about these things that he's been saying and why he should run for mayor. He's running for mayor, people. This is what he's running and his platform. I'm sure if Rob had saw some of this stuff this guy was posting, Rob, I would love to have Rob just come on and question him, because Rob would be like, what the heck? Ken too. But I got to thank everybody for tuning in the show. What I'm going to do, guys, I'm going to show you the video of the Taiwan tensions, and then I'm going to let SpongeBob do me a favor and take us home. So here we go with the Taiwan tensions, and then SpongeBob is going to take us home.
See you next Tuesday.
Thank you for listening to The Booth on Hoobazoo and HatcherRadio.com. Please follow the Facebook page and subscribe to the podcast at Apple Podcast, iHeartRadio, and Spotify. The Booth is a Sinister One production hosted by Sinister One.
I've got to start hanging out with friends that are a little more intelligent and understand politics and stuff. It's just that I'm up on this level up here, and all my friends are down here. Me, nah. You guys, nah. Maybe a little more down in here. Screw you guys, I'm going home.
I smoke, I drink, I do my thing. These bitches hating, so you know I got to make it plain. Don't do cocaine with your chick, my main. We stick together, true forever, yeah, you know we bang. I miss those days, which was easy. If only I made it, bitch, don't repeat. Now that I done upgraded that I've been upstate, but y'all think I'm playing. And I got a hit now for these weak ass hoes who think I ain't slaying. Try me, and I'll probably end up laughing, cause I never back down. I'm that chick with a clean ass whip, I don't need that shit, cause I got my own now. I get hard, I get tired of fussing, fighting, guess I gotta crack down. Don't mess with me, cause on everything, I'ma have to bring the whole city out.
WHOOBAZOO, that's Mazzulla.com.
Enter website, enter website, enter website, enter website.